And going live. Good morning, everyone. Look at this. We are 10 seconds early today, Andrew.
Oh, 10 seconds.
Punctuality,
Man.
everybody. Gotta love it. Good morning. Welcome to Maker That Money. This is episode 14. Today we're going to talk about the cost of chaos and getting organized with your small business venture and what the price of not doing so can be.
Oh, goodness.
I am Pooch, aka Repkord, on all the social medias. I have a small business called Repkord.com. We make and sell things that make your 3D printing experience better. With me, as always, my trusty sidekick, Mr. Andrew Mayhall of 3D Gloop. Good morning, Andrew. How you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Um, Guys, if you're with us on YouTube this morning, good morning, welcome, thank you for joining us. So we always love having our live studio audience with us, feeding us fantastic questions and commentary from the chat, and it's only ever fantastic and insightful, right, Andrew? We don't have people following us that don't give us thoughtful commentary. So we're appreciative that you're here. If you're listening back on the podcast later on and you want to join us on a future episode, we do have a call-in. It's not a number. We use internet technology systems nowadays, but we do encourage you guys to be part of this conversation because this is very much a work in progress for both of us, both of our businesses. We've both been at it for,
Absolutely.
a little over, 5 years now, right? I started in
We're going on
2016.
year 4. Yeah,
Okay,
we're
year
going on
four. You're in your fifth year.
Yeah.
You're in your fifth
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
or you're in your
Well,
fourth
we
year.
haven't reached 4th. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
be 4 years in June.
Look, the point
So.
is that we don't know what we're doing, and we're new, and
Yep.
so that's our disclaimer. I've always said, Andrew and I enjoy these calls anyway. We enjoy having these conversations, and we figured, hey, maybe there's some nuggets in here that other makers or creators or people that are thinking about starting a business might benefit from or enjoy or have questions about. And we enjoy interacting with our community in that way. And hopefully we're just, raising that level of discourse and thoughtfulness and some utility of the internet and all the things it has to offer, given that there's plenty of junk out there as well too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, man. Well, we always like to start the show with some wins, right? Because the power of positivity cannot be overstated here, especially
Yes.
in this day and age with all the junk out there that can tend to bring us down, right? And so, I'm going to share a win this week.
Do
I
it.
think a couple weeks ago, guys, if you listen back or if you want to go to the back catalog, we had a call on fraud. We've also talked about customer service and stuff like this. And so I had a particularly frustrating customer issue where somebody had both requested a refund from me and issued a chargeback at the same time, unbeknownst to me. And so they basically got double refunded, and we've for months and months and months went through this process where he was saying, well, I never got the chargeback money back and all this stuff. So and I'm like, well, here's my statements, where are your statements, and all this stuff. And eventually I am very pleased to say, because I was at a point where, and again, it was $800. It was not nothing, but I know in the scheme of big business and stuff, you're constantly making these evaluations, like, how much is this worth my time, right? But I'm a principled SOB, and I'm not about to just let somebody, double dip on me like that. And thankfully, this particular customer, while he was going through some hard times and dealing with stuff, he did the right thing. It was just really frustrating how long it took, and finally this week we kind of came to a resolution, and I was able to get back what I need. But it's frustrating when you're dealing with the third-party entities in PayPal or credit card processors sometimes, where they're just like, well, this isn't our problem. You need to work this out with the which is so maddening, because, they're the ones with all the money and the say on whether or not chargebacks happened. And, nobody's ever really talking about, the impact on business. It feels a little bit unfair that it's very quickly these entities will just say, it's a cost of doing business. This is why you have
Yep.
insurance, or this is why you can write things off. And
Yeah.
I hate that mentality. But the win was that I kept with it, and the customer stayed with me, and he kind of fell off the radar a bit and come back, but finally we came to a resolution. And so good things can happen if you're persistent and all that stuff. I probably spent way too much time and energy working on it, but these are the things that happen sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. Hack Monkey, he says PayPal is awful to deal with. Yes, I know you have opinions on that. They can
Oh
be.
yes.
I mean, the truth is, this goes back to our episode where we're talking about our reliance on third party systems. That
Mm-hmm.
there's really no perfect person out there. I'm sure anybody can come up with a story about how terrible any of these systems can
Yep.
be, but there are some necessary evils. You and I've had some debate over PayPal and the merits
Mm-hmm.
of taking it or not. And you definitely see a hit on the business side. Like if you refuse to take some of these convenient payment mechanisms,
Yep.
you are absolutely leaving some money on the table. People will not buy from
Yeah.
you. It's nice
Yeah.
because on the buyer side, it offers some protections, right? And I think that's why it's a lot, it's appealing. You feel like you're not re-exposing your credit card data every time and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, as these companies get bigger and bloated, they can tend to be more abusive on, well, we're PayPal, you don't like it, go,
Yeah.
Venmo your customers. I don't know.
Yep. Go Venmo. Oh man.
Yeah, but more ranting for another time. But
Yes.
let's dive in on organization today,
Oh
Andrew.
goodness.
So being the dramatic individual that I am, I love coming up with these titles like the cost of chaos, and you can just cue that like ominous music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, I will say I bring this up because we have a lot of work to do on this front. Like
Yeah.
I I I think we're okay in a lot of regards, but I think there's always room for improvement when it comes to getting organized. And the thing that drives me nuts personally is waste. Like I go
Mm-hmm.
crazy when I think of all this time and money and energy we're spending on things and having it go to waste sometimes, because we miss some detail that ends up costing us money or costing us extra time, which is money. So I guess it kind of all
Mm-hmm.
kind of comes back to
It's all about that money.
about that money. Right? And I know as makers traditionally, we don't all I don't know that organization is a strong suit for a lot of us stereotypically. I can't speak for everybody,
Absolutely not.
right? We get
What
so
you don't see behind the curtain
this
is
is
a
why we green
giant
screen.
pile of mess. Yeah.
Yeah, and listener, we if you haven't watched before, we have a nice green screen background for the very reason that we don't want to show off all the junk behind us. Also, so you can focus on our lovely faces, right?
Yeah.
But tell me what your experience with organization in your business life has been, and what the costs have been. You got any good stories for us as
Oh
it
yes.
applies to organization and chaos and the costs of your business?
Oh yeah. Well, for a while, right? When Gloop was getting started, we were running pretty fast, pretty loose, and we were keeping everything, kind of just stored up here in my head. Like, oh, hey, how many bottles do we have? How many, how many brushes do we have? How many how much seal material do we have?
Ooh,
And it got to the point where it was like very hard to deal with. It's like, oh well, shoot, we're going to run production and we're out of bottles, and we're like, well, we can't run production today. What's going on?
yeah, yeah.
And at the we weren't very organized at first, and we've gotten a lot better, but it cost us, just being able to deliver product on time, being able
Okay,
to deliver with resellers, that sort of stuff.
sure.
But some horror stories. So if you guys don't know, this isn't my first rodeo in doing a business. I had a previous startup in the past. That one was quite a bit different. We were kind of private equity, venture backed.
Right.
Lots of cash. Running as fast as possible. Um, we were terrible at the organization. And there were like there were some really really painful times.
Wow. So
To give you
because you guys were so big comparatively, like so many people, or what, like what do you
we weren't
suppose?
yeah. So we weren't super big, I would say. At our height, we had about 17 people. At the time this happened, we were probably around 8 or 9. What happened was, again, we weren't very well organized. We didn't keep things coming, so we developed server platforms. And these are like big computers, Facebook data center level, Google data center, Amazon data center stuff. And so we were developing these really cool server platforms. And as a part of it, we had some very custom engineered circuit boards, PCBs, FPGAs, ASICs, you name it.
Mm.
And, there was a constant development cycle. And in this one particular instance, I remember the, the just pain that it caused, that sinking gut feeling. Um, what happened was, we ended up throwing away about $40,000 worth of custom computer boards because
Like
no
literally
one
throwing away.
literally throwing it
Oh
away
man.
because someone put it in a box and they put it next to a giant pile of other boxes that, were just sitting there for
40,000. Jeez.
weeks.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, and what was bad was at first we didn't realize it, and then we were looking around. We're like, "What's going on? Where is this at?" And because we were so disorganized, like we had things stored in different rooms. We had no real like, okay, hey, this is how we handle when we get new material in. We check it in. We make sure we got what we paid for, and then we put it up in a very specific location. No, it just kind of got thrown around, and it would travel around the office or whatever to various things, and we wouldn't track it. And
Wow.
yeah, it came to time to develop or build out one of these prototype systems, and we couldn't find the boards. And we're like, where are the boards? Where are the boards? Like we know we had them, right? At least we think we had them. But again, therein lies some other disorganization. We never wrote down, oh yes, we actually received what we ordered, right? So it was like, well, did we actually receive them? Or did we just throw them away?
Oh.
Like,
Oh, yeah, I'm so triggered right now. I mean, first of all, I love story time with Gloop that we get from you. It's like you always have these the best stories that always seem to be applicable to whatever we're talking about. But man, the pain that you guys must have felt when you realized that.
well, let's just say the meeting with the board of directors was very uncomfortable.
Yes. So guys, about your money, about the
Ye
company's
we
money.
we we lost $40,000 because we threw it away.
But it's okay. We're gonna make it up to you. We're gonna. Jeez. What do you mean you
Oh,
threw it away? I
man.
mean, isn't it nuts to think it's like you may as well have just like taken $40,000 and lit it on fire? Like
Literally.
that is just. I mean that's not. And this has to be. And I'm not trying to be flippant with this
Mhm.
because I realize that is more money than many people on this earth see in many years worth of income and
Mhm.
stuff, and it feels um unbelievably just wasteful and disrespectful
Mhm.
of how hard people are working for minimum wage jobs and stuff like that. That's not really
Yep.
the point, but when you get into these large businesses and you start talking about the scale of money and effort that goes into them, we're talking in
Mhm.
in an aggregate that goes way beyond people's personal finances, that a lot of times that they're
Mhm.
trying to relate it back to, right? They're like, geez, I didn't even like my first job when I made $30,000 a year or something coming out of
Yeah.
college. Dating myself a little bit here, but I'm like, if you were to tell me back then, like, oh yeah, we just threw away 40 grand worth of stuff, I'd be like, man, that sucks. I worked all year and I didn't even make $40,000. Um,
Yep.
so
Yep. Well, what's even worse is that, that's just the value of the components. That doesn't include the time or, the
Right.
effort to actually make that, right? And so again, when we start talking about chaos, like the cost of chaos, these boards that we were making back then, they were like 26 layers or 12 to 26 layers depending on the board,
Ooh,
right?
that's a lot of layers.
Um
Yeah.
yeah, and they were like eighth of an inch, if not 3/16 of an inch thick, and we're talking like super high advanced like materials too, like high speed, like 6 gigahertz, sort of transmission rates, and these things took weeks to
Oh yeah.
actually have manufactured. And there was like so many steps involved. So first you had to validate the design, right? So, each board that we had made, it was a very specific design. You had to validate that. You had to send that out to a fab. They
Sure.
run through their processes, make for sure that, hey, there's no errors or gotchas. Then from there, they start actually procuring the materials, which takes weeks at a time to get. Then
Sure.
you actually, build the board, right? Layer by layer. That takes about, a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then from there, you send that out to plating because the outside of the boards have to be electroplated, with gold or
Sure. So,
silver
so
or
there's a lot of
whatever.
goes into the fabrication, but
Yeah.
all in. I mean, what do you think? I would say your next biggest cost is obviously your engineer's time for doing the design. I mean, what do you think
I,
this
it
mistake really
was
cost you guys with all the
at the end of the day with
yeah
the lead times and everything else, it was well over
sure
100,
oh
well over a hundred
geez
thousand dollars.
wow okay so
Yeah.
yeah yeah
Once you start factoring in the just again the loss, so we had to deliver this to a specific customer too, and the customer was going to pay for these units, and we couldn't deliver, and so that customer said, "Well, you can't deliver, so give
Reputational
me my money
cost
back."
yeah
Exactly.
yeah
You know,
So
and
so cost goes well beyond just dollar figures for material, and this is another rant
Mhm.
we love to have. Like people, when they look at something, they're just making an evaluation on like, well, I can buy this for this, and so this is what the cost is. But yeah, no, your point is
Mhm.
well taken. Obviously, you've got labor hours, you've got opportunity cost involved,
Mhm.
so yeah, man, that adds up quickly, especially at scale when you're a larger
Yeah.
company. And then
Yeah.
reputational costs, like I said, I mean that's a
Yep.
bad one, right? Like now you got a
Yep.
company, maybe you had a contract with, potentially could have been worth millions over time, something like that,
Mhm.
that is now up in smoke. So, I can see arguments
Yep.
made for like overall this could have cost the company who knows how much money, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. But
Yeah.
the important takeaway is it's because we didn't have processes in place, and it's because we didn't have just simple little checks and balances, right? That the chaos ensued, and it naturally, it finds its way out, right? It's like entropy.
Oh my God. Entropy is real and relentless. Everything tends toward chaos, and you're
Yeah.
constantly raging
Yep.
against it, raging against it.
Yep.
Um, wow. Well, I don't have anything. I mean, it makes me feel better about, like the waste and how it applies to my small operation at Repkord. It certainly
Mhm.
hasn't been, that bad, but I'll get bent out of shape over stupid stuff like, really, you're taking our, our boxes and cutting them up and making them into a model or something like that, and it's like, you know, it feels significant. First of all, when it's like it's my it's and I say it's like it's the company's money, but I'm the sole owner, and so
Mhm.
nobody cares about your money the way you care about your
Yep.
money when you're bootstrapped,
Yep.
and it's and so you almost take it more personally sometimes when you're like witnessing waste happening, and being able to take a step back and appreciating that there are costs of business, and that inefficiencies and disorganization is certainly one of them, and there's hopefully you learn some lessons and you start to put some things in place so that you can minimize that. There's
Mhm.
absolutely those things where it may feel wasteful, but you're really stepping over a dollar to pick up a penny, for things so
Yep.
out of principle. So sometimes your principles can cost you a lot of stuff. I was talking about at the beginning of the show, evaluating like how much is it worth
Mhm.
going after this $800 if I'm
Yeah.
spending 50 hours and I'm making less
Yeah.
than $2 an hour on my time for something like that.
Mhm.
So that which is, right is not always the correct thing to do. Sometimes you just got to kind of swallow the hard thing and move on, because for the sake of the business, that's the better play. But that's a bit of a
Yep.
digression. Um, but so now I would say I can think of just so many times where I can just see like waste happening, costing us stuff, like
Mhm.
forgetting, inventory controls. Like I historically came from
Yes.
service based companies in the past. Like I was a,
Mhm.
a freelance web developer. And so I was, providing a service. And so I wasn't having to manage all of these widgets coming in and going out. And,
Yep.
it took me a long time to get up to speed on the complexities of that and the costs of that. Obviously, like running out of stock on things
Yeah.
has a huge impact. Like if you're thinking about getting on Amazon or any of these other big box movers out there, I can very much tell you that there is a cost associated with running out of stock, where you start to ride a wave when they'll feature, they have these algorithms that are promoting your product and stuff, but
Mhm.
they very much can keep track of how consistently you can keep the machine fed. And
Yep.
that's a reputational cost that a lot of times I think people don't realize when they're getting into Amazon, that you'll pay a big price for. You run out of stock and they're going to be like, this guy,
Yep.
is maybe not serious about it.
Yeah.
So, there is absolutely costs associated with that. And, running out of stock, running out of your work in progress materials. And it
Oh,
feels like a
yep.
juggling act of massive proportion sometimes, just keeping all the balls in the air, keeping all the parts coming in the door
Mhm.
to keep the product going out the door. Um,
Yep.
and I think a lot of times we might expect that, the responsibility for, saying something
Yep.
would, lie on whomever they operate. An operator is working and they just work through a bucket of widgets and then they're like, we're out of widgets, and, don't say anything. And if you
Yep.
don't have a process in place for like, when you run out of
Yeah.
widgets, you need to talk to the purchasing department so that we buy more
Yeah.
widgets, right?
Yep.
Um, and those kind of things, didn't occur to me at first, because I'm like, well, of course you would say something. Why wouldn't you say something?
Why wouldn't you tell me? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. I moved on to something else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that you highlighted another good point is when you're like us makers or whatever, we always have this tendency, have a little ADHD, right? So we're working on something and then we'll jump to another thing, right? And especially if we're running a business, there's fires all around us, and we're trying to put out those fires all the time,
Oh my
and it's
gosh.
very
Fire, fire,
easy
fire.
to
Yeah.
just literally just transition from one thing to the next. And if you don't have a strict set of processes or rules that you're going to follow, it becomes very easy to lose track of where you've been, what you've done, and how much of like you have or whatever it might be,
Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
So yeah, the cost of chaos goes just beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And the challenge is that for so many, and you can apply this to your personal life or your business life or anything, that it
Hmm.
feels like it's just one of those things that's just not sexy. It's low priority,
Hmm.
right? You're not thinking about, it's one of those things where like, yeah, I'm gonna clean my room later. I'll get organized in here. And a lot of times, the stakes are relatively low. What the worst thing that happens if you don't, do the dishes in the sink, or you got some smelly dishes in your sink for another couple days
Yep.
or something.
Yeah. Yep.
um but when it comes to running a business, the aggregate of those missteps will add up very quickly, can add up
Hmm.
very quickly. We got
Well,
to
yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, you have something to add to that?
I was gonna say, you bring up another good point is like, while you say something seems small, especially in your business, like, for instance, we have a lot of cardboard that we deal with, right? And I hate breaking down cardboard.
Right.
It's one of those things where it's frustrating. Like, it's like now I got to spend time doing this, and so sometimes I'll let it pile up, and then I'm left with a mountain of cardboard. Right.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now I'm going to go through and I'm going to break it all down. But now I'm wasting more time going through all of this, or like, this giant mound of cardboard
Oh
that I could have
man.
very easily been doing, just a little bit here and there as I was going, and
Right.
it's just like, again, you might not see the cost, right? It might not be super apparent, but having a process in place will pay in spades, for being able to,
Right.
free up time and just, make things move so much easier.
Well, and a lot of times it's not an immediate thing. It's about setting a
Hmm.
precedent so that, and setting process so that as you scale and as more people get involved,
Hmm.
it's very like they are trained from day one to
Yep.
be more efficient. Like that is one of the hardest things when when you're growing and scaling a business, because it's like when it was just me, I knew well, I'm out of this, and so I had to do all the things, and
Hmm.
I didn't need to leave notes. And so like I mean, I would forget stuff, but my point is that you talked about when you got up to like 13 employees and stuff like that, you're talking about exponential potential for screw
Yep.
ups. The more people that you layer on, and the more assumptions that are made, and the more
Hmm.
expectations that are out there. So like we say with a lot of things, you're investing in your future a lot of the times
Yep.
by doing this. We
Yep.
got a question in the chat for YouTube. CRS1 says, do you track assets and depreciation for your printers and equipment?
Hmm.
You want to answer that, and I can do the same.
Yeah, we absolutely do. Granted, we don't have a whole lot of printers, but what we do have is a lot of very expensive
But
reaction
assets,
vessels
yeah.
and assets. We even now have a bottling line, so yeah, we track that, but it's not so much a constant, like, everyday thing. Basically, it's pretty simple. There are tools out there. You input it into your accounting software, and you say, listen, this is what I bought. This is kind of what category it falls in, and you can kind of select a depreciation curve for it. And that then comes up on a P&L statement, or something, at the end of the year, when you're looking at, your current assets, your current cash on hands, your basic general health of your business. And from there, then you can make educated guesses, if you will, on what new things that you want to spend that depreciation on, right?
Right, right.
Because that depreciation counts for, reducing the amount of tax you pay. So there are definitely, like, tricks and balances there to do.
Yeah.
And it's something we don't do, like, the best at, but yeah, we absolutely track it in a minimal sense, I would say.
I can just like feel like some of our listeners and our viewers eyes rolling into the back of their head when we bring up like
Yeah.
taxes and accounting and
Oh,
all these
yes.
things that, at least I for me, that evokes a visceral reaction, because it's just like I don't like that stuff. It's a necessary evil, and it
Mhm.
informs so many decisions and stuff. So it's like I understand, and we do it. Yes. So to answer your
Yep.
question, absolutely, we track assets and depreciation and stuff. Did we when we first started as well as we should have? Absolutely not. We didn't even know what we were doing when we first got started. These are things that you pick up as you go. For those that might not be so financially savvy, um, assets, obviously anything that the business owns and stuff like that, especially larger ticket items.
Mhm.
Over time, you're allowed to basically say devalue these things because they're just not worth as much. I mean, we experience that in our personal lives all the time. You buy a car, it loses money
Yep.
the minute you drive it off the lot.
Yep.
One of the advantages of being a business and owning a business are that you can take a lot of those expenses that you're encountering on a regular basis, and save a lot of money by um, representing the true value or the devaluing things over time. So you don't
Mhm.
your tax burden isn't as heavy and stuff like that. And
Yep.
so, as unsexy as that is, like, learning the financial side of things will very significantly, can very significantly make or break you. I have a professor in college that always he taught like, I don't know, 10 different courses, but his last course was always like how I made my millions or whatever. And because it was like a second career for him to teach after, he had successfully been in the private industry. And his number
Mm-hmm.
one thing was, the number one way to make and accrue wealth rapidly is to keep as much of your money legally as possible from the government. Think about what
Yep.
percentage of your income goes on an annual basis to the government.
It's a
And
lot.
it's a lot. It's a lot. And so, we're not advocating, not paying your taxes, but, huge advantage of starting even just a small business is how
Mm-hmm.
how readily you can move the needle in terms of like keeping money in your pocket for things that you would be doing anyway. He was big in real estate, and so he's like, we'd
Mm-hmm.
want to go on a vacation to Hawaii, and I would just make a point of making sure we went and looked at some property while we were there, so I could write off the airline ticket. We were going to go to. Anyway. So
Yep.
I know you can get into weird areas, and
Yeah.
we are not offering tax advice, whatsoever, but
No, no, we are not.
but the point is that there's even if you decide you're not going to scale your business to any kind of size, like just having that to keep some more money in your pocket by
Mm-hmm.
again saving tax money on things that you would probably do anyway is a great idea, and I would always recommend that to anybody. um let's go back for a second, if we could, to just
Sure.
the challenges of the especially in the maker community of
Mm-hmm.
forcing yourself to get organized in the name of saving money and being more efficient and operating. Like we talked about, you mentioned like breaking down the cardboard boxes as you
Oh,
go,
yes.
right? I'm
Yeah.
very big on like we are we are um we are a work as we go, clean as we go kind of shop, right? That's what I'd
Yep.
like to be.
Yep.
Whether we are or not, varies, and it's the same. I can't. I've got no leg to stand
Yep.
on. There's some days where it's like, yeah, I keep the dishwasher, loaded and unloaded and I'm feeling like things are firing, and then I fall off the wagon because there's only so many hours in the day, and your attention gets dragged to other places.
Yep.
Um, it's not as easy, in practice as it is in theory, though, given the
Yep.
constraints of our day, right? To like work as we go. So it's like, how are you coming up with the calculus in your mind on what's worth like really making sure that we're creating process so that we're working as we go versus like how much is this really moving the needle? You know what I'm asking?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So, for us, it was at first, it was really trying to break down, if you will, where we were losing money. The things that were preventing us from being able to deliver, for Gloop bottles on time, right? We're like, okay, hey, what could we do here that helps us speed up that process? And then it was just, okay, well, these are the steps that we need to take in order to ensure that we're not leaving money on the table, if you will. And so yeah, it all comes back down to the money, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At least for us, right? um and that's how we prioritized. So we start with lowest hanging fruit, some of the simplest things,
Right.
one of them being inventory tracking, right? Creating a spreadsheet that it basically says, hey, we need to build 150 Gloop bottles for a PO, right? Okay, so we just type in all of the bottles that we have, and then it pulls from our current inventory, if you will, and says, hey, you're going to need more brushes, or you're going to need more seals,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, now we got to go make some of those, or we got to keep track of that.
Yeah.
And this is a daily log that we can just update
Right.
very quickly.
Right.
And so yeah, it all comes back down to money. Lowest hanging fruit for us was just inventory tracking. um
Yeah, and
you
I don't know
know
if you saw this or not, but Adam was asking, Powerbelt 3D was asking about inventory tracking recommendations. So it sounds like you're just in spreadsheet land at the moment for that.
Right now,
Yeah.
yes, but we are actively transitioning over to an ERP system, so an enterprise resource, planning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what that is doing is it's going to tie directly into our website or e-commerce platform that will then tell us, hey, you've got these number of orders coming in. This is your 30-day average. This is, like the rolling average. This is what you have on hand. This is and we can start tying in our production runs, right? And we can
Right.
say, hey, we're producing all of these, and we can start figuring out, hey, we don't have to produce as much this time, or we can produce more this time. So there's actually a lot still there. And when you get to like larger enterprise organizations, there's a lot of effort put into this.
Yeah,
We won't ever probably reach that level of effort that we're going to put into it, but it has substantially helped. Um, just in the past year, we never really used to keep track of batches. Like we would produce Gloop on, a weekly basis, and we
hmm,
would produce hundreds of bottles on a weekly basis.
sure,
But the problem for us is we weren't keeping track of those batches. Like what bottles went where to what reseller, and we just went through a recall. But thankfully, at the
mm,
beginning of the year, we actually started keeping logs, and it was one of those things where we layered on. And so we saw, hey, if we start keeping logs, we can, maybe prevent future headaches. And thankfully, it was so much easier for us to track down some of those bottles in a recall. Um, and again, that's a whole nother thing of about, chaos, right? The cost of chaos, because we
yep,
weren't doing this, we weren't organized there. But since we started putting a priority to become organized, it substantially helped,
sure.
and reduced that burden, I
Well,
would say.
and ERP, MRP systems are great. So
Mhm.
MRP is another layer of complexity when you get into manufacturing, materials, resource
Mhm.
planning, or
Yep.
software and stuff like that. And we're lucky we live in a day and age where there's all kinds of amazing tools available to us for this stuff. But obviously, as a
Mhm.
small business, a lot of those things are catered more toward much larger enterprise. And so it's like, we got those champagne wishes with, the shoestring budget,
Yep.
and reconciling that. And so, obviously, informing yourself to it, researching it, seeing like what practices maybe you can take and accept. And as you're getting started, a lot of times like a spreadsheet is more than adequate, but having something, having an awareness
Mhm.
of the problem
Yep.
and what that organization affords you in terms of like saving you money and time and
Mhm.
energy. But again, no, I guess it all comes down to money again, as we say,
Yep.
um, is big. And when you're first getting started, these are a lot of these are the advantages of experience.
Mhm.
You don't know, you're not aware. We talk about you don't know what you don't know all the time. Um, I didn't come across like this terminology until, I was well into the process and I started asking questions of other businesses. Hey, how do you handle this? How do a lot of the things that we're getting questions here for, and
Mhm.
how we answer the question at, where we are year 4, year 5 in the business versus how somebody that's 10 years in and has, a lot more resources obviously going to be very different. But we're
Yep.
trying to frame it with the mindset of like trying to remember where we were when we were first getting started. It doesn't do you guys any good if we're making you, oh, you need to get this like, $750,000 piece of software
Yeah.
that's gonna like that doesn't do me any good, right? So,
Yep.
what's the, and we'll talk about this more. We've got it on tap for a future episode, but like learning how to do more with less, right? Like learning how to
Yep.
operate lean. And speaking of lean, Brandon Langdon out there was mentioning the Kanban system. If you guys aren't familiar with that, there is so much. There are literally like degrees and certifications around quality assurance, quality control, process control, all of that stuff.
Mhm.
A lot of these things were pioneered by the automotive industry. I want
Yep.
to say, I don't know if Kanban was a Nissan. TQM is a really popular one. Toyota's quality management process. Obviously,
Mhm.
there's things like Six Sigma, and
Yep.
when you start getting into um, really formalized efficiency control systems. I think Kanban, and it's been a while since I studied it, but there's like card systems at every step along the way of processes, and I may be conflating this with TQM. The
Mhm.
ability for everybody to be able to push a button to stop the production line and say, "Hey, we have a problem here. We're out." So that these
Yeah.
inefficiencies of the daisy chain or the domino effect of a problem going further and further down the line and becoming more and more costly are not as costly, right?
Yep.
So that doesn't do you guys a lot of good if you're not, operating in a true
Yeah.
production line. But the metaphor is very good, I think, in thinking
Hmm.
in how you approach the problem of scaling and how those costs can add up. Thinking about it in a linear fashion a lot of the time, um,
Hmm.
it can, can help. It's again, it comes back to just stopping, taking a step back, and trying to
Hmm.
look at the problem from the 10,000 foot view, and get away from the putting out the fires or plugging the holes in the dike, as pick your
Yep.
pick your metaphor,
Yep.
that really will pay dividends down the road. And it's
Hmm.
a hard thing in practice, because you're just go go go. Hey, we got this order and we got to fill it. We got to everything
Yep.
feels like you're on the clock.
Yes. Yes. And it is hard to say, hey, I need to take a day to set up processes, right? Because it doesn't move that needle, right? But what we realized very quickly is once we had these processes, they were easy to kind of maintain, and then it was just easier to run everything else.
Right.
So don't undervalue that time and effort put into it.
Right.
So
Right. We got a lot of people in the chat opining on whether or not they love or hate spreadsheets, which is which is an interesting thing, because it's like to me it seems like such a daily part of my life in all
Yep.
kinds of aspects. It's like, if you don't know how to run a spreadsheet in this day and age, it feels like, to me, business 101 or life 101, even like akin to being able to type, that
Mhm.
the usefulness of that as a tool. But I understand that it's not everybody's cup of tea. Maybe speak for a moment, if you would, on forcing yourself to use tools or understand things maybe sometimes, and the value of that, uh if you feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Well, so, spreadsheets, I mean, I like them and I hate them, right? There's some really big limitations, but you could get into the programming, Visual Basics, macros, and you can make them incredibly powerful
Oh
if you
yeah.
want, right?
Yeah, no, it's
Um, for most businesses, right? You're going to use a spreadsheet for keeping track of something complex. Like you're going to need a matrix, right? You got these parts. It's going to cost you this. You need to find the total costs, whatever it might be.
right.
We use spreadsheets in a variety of different ways. We actually have a project planning spreadsheet where every day we, basically say, hey, this is a task. It needs to get done. We sign a date at which the task we would like to get it done, and we sign a priority, and we look at it every single day, and we try and keep track of where we are. And then once it's done, we mark it off the list. And what's cool is we now have a record of the tasks that we've completed,
Right.
and things that have changed since then. But yeah, I mean, it is a valuable skill to learn and say, okay, hey, like put some effort into planning or utilizing the tools that you have
Right. and
effectively.
it's not the tool part is what I want to focus on, because it's not about
Hmm.
spreadsheets or whatever. It honestly goes back to what you're talking about, is having a process
Hmm.
and creating that. And whether there's always going to be things that we hate. Like, I didn't want to have to learn QuickBooks and or
Hmm.
the accounting software, but there's nobody else to do it, and it has to be done. And there is a very very direct correlation to
Hmm.
keeping your finances organized and being able to properly report tax, and making sure that you're
Yep.
getting all the write-offs that you need, and saving it. So I hate it, but I have to do it. Like, and I think that is the
Yep.
crux of the decision making process for a lot of people. It's like, yeah, I like the creation. I like making things. I like being able to make money from it.
Hmm.
But if I've got to do all these other things, like, that just doesn't feel worth it to me. And that's a very personal decision. And a lot of people,
Yep.
say, you know what, I don't want to kill the fun of this hobby by laying on all these things that I have to do to
Hmm.
do it effectively to make money. Um,
Hmm.
and I think the challenge with that is, one, appreciating that it's rarely as bad as I think we tend to think it is. Like I know I have a habit of building these things up as these monsters in my head, and then I do it, and I was like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. Um, and so putting process in place and kind of making yourself do things sometimes just to show yourself that, hey, this
Mhm.
is achievable. You can learn this. It's actually not as hard as you think. And again, taking a tiered approach to it, you don't have to. You got to walk before you run. You don't need to
Yep.
like build all these whiz bang complex things. You
Yeah.
can take an incremental approach. As much as I would love to have a website with an ERP system integrated and all that stuff, I know that that's going to take a lot of money, a lot of training, a lot of support
Mhm.
and maintenance over time and all that stuff. And so I intentionally force myself to probably remain overly simplistic just until I feel like we have the resources to properly implement something. That's
Mhm.
there's no right or wrong answers here. Like I can see plenty of arguments for like we're not going to even start this until we can invest in having this tool to do it.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
and I'm sure many people have many different opinions on the approach for that.
Yeah.
I favor the keep it simple stupid approach because it goes back to what I've said on past episodes, the psychological cost of things,
Yeah.
of burnout. Um
Yep.
spending a lot of money, not feeling like you're making a lot of progress on things, and
There's
wearing yourself into the ground over things that, you're probably just getting out in front of your skis on a little bit too much, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, there's something to be said for, realizing where you're at in the position of your business and preventing yourself, right, from implementing something because you can't get the right thing, right? But I,
Mhm.
I will argue saying that something most of the time is better than nothing, right? And implementing a process, even though if you know that you can't really, get the exact tool that you want, right, or the ERP system or whatever, starting, and going through that and putting it in early so that as you scale and get more employees, they get accustomed to dealing with your processes and say, "Oh yeah, okay, I understand now." Right? I think there's a huge benefit there.
Mhm.
It might not
Mhm.
be perfect, right? And you might have to cut some corners. It might not be exactly what you want, but the more you can start implementing processes earlier on, I think the easier time you're going to have for scaling them out. Because if if you just wait until the end and you've done all of this in your head, changing to a process is going to be so much harder, right? And it's going to be less likely to be successful because it's such a drastic change.
Well,
Um,
that is spot on, and that goes to the age old adage of it is really hard to teach an old dog new tricks a lot of the time.
yeah.
I think about the human implications a lot of times because I think that's where the this road is most
Hmm.
fraught with peril in terms of the potential for costliness. When you layer on other people who, like I said, are not as financially invested as you, a lot of the time,
Hmm.
and all that stuff. But trying to put in place new processes and getting people to basically do what they feel like is more work. And
Hmm.
it's which is not always the case. I think that's a perception. They're thinking like, oh, I got to do this now. I got to do this now.
Yeah.
Like what was wrong with the way it was? Well, it wasn't
Yeah.
so terrible for you because it wasn't costing you money, but it's terrible for me.
Yeah.
Watching these things happen. So you're absolutely right that trying to start as organized as possible, especially before you're bringing new people in. It's way easier
Hmm.
to bring somebody up to speed on this is the way that we do things than somebody that's been there for years
Yeah.
and now feels like I got to do this too, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Um, I'm kind of just in silly minutia, but I feel like I've been talking about like just silly stuff like whose turn is it to clean the kitchen and the bath, like the things that nobody wants to do in the shop, but everybody uses it. We
Yep.
don't have a janitorial service. There's only four of us in there, but like
Yep.
all these things need to be done. And I can't tell you, like on my to-do list has been like write up a quick, clipboard thing for, name date,
Yep.
last time the bathroom was cleaned and who did it, just
Yep.
so that we're not arguing over who had to do it last, and keeping some accountability in front of everybody, like
And
this is the
something
last
like
time it was
that
done.
is so simple, but it helps out so much,
Right.
right? Again, it's just while it might not be like this multi-page sort of this is the document for how you ship and pack and order. It's something. It's just like there it is. It's quick. It's easy. You can take a quick glance and understand where you are, right,
Right.
in the process.
Right.
Of maintaining your kitchen, right, or your bathroom. Um,
A-
you know,
And I bring something
so
like that up because I think that it's good to hear that there are just simple applications that have an impact sometimes. Like I said,
mhm,
that's a silly one because the cost of having a dirty bathroom. Well, when people come and visit,
yeah.
it's like this place is a dump versus like okay,
Yeah.
these people care about things. So it's like, and then there's obviously safety implications. Like we make sure that we sweep up at the end of the day, and
Mhm.
certainly at the end of the week we do a little bit more, take all the trashes out, that kind of stuff. And
Like a
as
closing checklist,
oh yeah,
it's like, "Hey, we're gonna close down the shop. These are the things you
right.
need to do,"
Are the
right?
lights turned off? Is the compressor shut down? Like there is certainly
Yep.
things that have safety implications. They have cost. Electrical. Electricity isn't free.
Mhm.
Obviously, like doing those things. But again, it's kind of the last thing that you think of, and a lot of times they don't reveal themselves to you until you start to scale a bit more. It's
Yeah.
not a problem when it's just like you and one other person. Hey, can you go take that out, or did you, But um, when more people start getting involved and stuff like that, and then the cost of there not being a process, or somebody teaching the wrong process to somebody else,
Y
or making up their own process or whatever.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. Oh, the making up their own process or the wrong process that was just inferred from the lack of a process, right? Could be so hard to train out. Um, you know,
yeah.
and become a nightmare very quickly.
Right. Right.
So,
Um, one of the things I have to do to try to maintain perspective, and I got to be careful because I don't know. Sometimes my guys will watch the stream, um, but I try to be as upfront and candid about it. I'm not trying to be like any kind of slave driver, but it's so hard when I, as a parent here, I'm trying to impart like cleanliness and organizational, values on my children,
yeah.
and to feel like I have to go. Brandon brings this up in the chat. Like, it's like, why are there always people that just don't care about cleaning their dishes as much and all that stuff, and setting these expectations that like these are adults and we all know and live and should at the very basic be good roommates and clean up
Yeah.
after ourselves. And the truth is, like, I'm probably the worst offender a lot of the time because I'm like, I go in there and I make a coffee, or I don't make coffee there, but I'll make my lunch and then I'll forget to clean out the microwave when I'm done or whatever, and then I'll move on to something else. And we all do it, and
Mhm.
it's hard to give other people grace sometimes for the the distractions out there. And you don't want to play the like, well, do as I say, don't not as I do card.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Or I'm the boss and I get to not have to clean, and you don't have that
Yeah.
luxury. It's like I don't play that card. Like I
I'm the
take my
king.
turn. I take my turn clean because that's the leadership style that I want to have. I probably could stand to do it more, but it's like I clean the bathroom and I clean the toilet just like everybody. I take my turn. We all use it. um that doesn't necessarily scale well as you grow, but for where we are right now,
Mhm.
I prefer that more democratic approach to things.
Egalitarian.
Egalitarian, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So these are just kind of like silly little quirky things that go, but like I said, can add up. Like if there is a cost associated with these things, either in a psychological cost and a safety cost.
Mhm.
All those things. It goes beyond just money a lot of the time, or at least
Yeah.
directly money.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, like I don't know if you were to pick which your tips for people that are just getting, like, try to go back to like when you were just getting started, right?
Mhm.
And layering on like what's going to move the needle the most for people in terms of like where they need to focus fire on getting
Sure.
organized. And I think that's variable depending on what the business is and what they are
It
doing.
very much so is. Yeah, so for us, like some of the first things that we did was I kind of developed a process. I didn't really write this down because I'm the only guy who actually makes the product, but I developed a process that would hopefully keep making Gloop like very consistent between batch to batch to batch, right? I have a very strict rule order of
Sure.
operations that I follow when running the reactions to make Gloop.
As you should.
And
That's your secret sauce.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so for me at first, it was about maintaining quality. And then I started layering on additional things like for instance, okay, now we have these products. Like, how do we move the product up and make for sure that it's shipping correctly, right? Because at the time we had caps that would sometimes pop off during shipping because rough handling, that sort of stuff. So I then developed a process, but I was also obligated to develop a process in some cases for the Department of Transportation saying this is how we ship our product, right?
Right, right.
So I had to develop that, and that is an actual written down process with images and everything else.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
again, it was a safety thing, but it was also a regulatory thing. There was multiple aspects to it.
Right.
So I think you start with the most important aspect to you. If it's money, then okay, that's fine. Prioritize saving the money,
Mhm.
or minimizing waste. If it's quality, try and figure out processes in which if you're manufacturing something, like again, makers, we're always making something. Maybe it's a 3D printer that you have a very specific process. When you get your files in, you slice them in a very particular way. You print a test sample, whatever. You basically go through orders of operations, if you will.
Right.
So I think it really depends on the type of business that you're running. But I would say pick a major category, whether it's quality, safety, monetary, and then figure out ways in which you can layer on little simple things. Again, a process can be simple as a checklist. Did I make for sure that the part didn't have supports, right?
Yes.
And then I'm slicing at the right layer height, per
Right.
the customer's request.
Right.
That's a process,
Right.
right? And then you can layer on additional things. Sometimes it helps to have it written down where you physically have a little card that you take along if you're
Mhm.
printing things for
Mhm.
orders, on your Etsy shop. Oh, hey, yeah, this is the order. Like, I took the file in, I sliced it, I used these settings, check. This was the time I started the print, check. This is the amount of material that I used after I weighed it, right?
Right.
And this way, what you'll notice is like in manufacturing, if you have those processes, then you can say, hey, wait a second, something went wrong with this print, right? Or something
Right.
went wrong with this batch of glue, which is exactly how we caught, our bad batch that made it out fairly quickly. We're like, wait a second, something wasn't right, you
Yeah.
know, and it was because those processes that we could go back and rely on
Right. And thank goodness for that because a recall
them.
can completely end you potentially, like with how
Mm-hmm.
financially costly it can be to like have to, take stuff back, fix it. It depends on what you're doing. You can just
Yep.
ship out stuff. Yeah, it's painful because it feels like, well, now I'm having to give away free stuff, but I mean,
Yeah.
you do the right thing, and that's a great example of why systems,
Mm-hmm.
the flagging systems or card systems or process systems like will really pay off as painful and I keep saying unsexy as it is to have to sit down and write documentation and process. I
Yeah.
mean, like, ugh, I hate just
Well,
talking about
one
it sometimes. As I don't
one
like
thing
doing it.
that's also glossed over is for instance, when we were my past startup, when we started developing processes that we could crank out a research paper or a white paper, we made the company more valuable because we had these things in place.
Right,
So what is glossed over so much is like, oh, hey, I've got this value, right? Because I make these things and this is my revenue, right?
right,
And
right.
that's how you're assigning value. But there are intangible value, like intellectual property value. And for
Absolutely.
a company like for us, that we have a trade secret product, right? It's not in the appearance of the patents or our revenue. It's in the process in which we actually make our product, right? Which is so much more
Absolutely.
valuable. And so
Absolutely.
again, these
Yeah.
processes go to adding value to your company, to your business, as you implement them and the more detailed and specific they get, the better and better you can become at doing the thing that you do best,
You know,
right?
that is such a profound way of putting it, and it's something like this is why I love these calls. And like I said, I would do them even if nobody else was listening, like all this stuff, because like I just don't even think about that. The fact that yeah, I talk about it as like you're investing in your company, but no, I don't even you don't even think about the value that it adds, the institutional knowledge, that the
Hmm.
process is so much of what brings value to your company, that you can
Hmm.
efficiently produce these things. This is what makes um, I think very easily people are like, well, somebody else could just come along and make an adhesive and compete with you, and
Yeah.
you're like, well, yeah, I mean, no, you get hung up on like, okay, maybe somebody might have the chemistry knowledge and stuff like that, but it doesn't
Hmm.
mean they're going to be able to produce it in an efficient way so that the margins are where they need to be, and all that value that you're imparting along the way. And we
Exactly.
very, yeah,
It's
I just didn't even,
intangible. Yeah. It's
yeah,
interesting, right? Because
yeah,
so many people are like, "Oh, well, hey, why can't I just use super glue?" Or, well, someone else, like when we're talking to other people, what's preventing someone else from coming and taking you guys out? And it's like, well, yeah, they absolutely can, but what you end up seeing is that big organizations, when they are looking at markets and spaces, they see other companies operating in them, and then they start evaluating those companies and they have conversations, maybe their initial ones,
right,
and they want to get a sense for your scale of process, right?
right,
That's what I learned in, with my first startup is how do you handle these things of taking an idea and turning it into an actual product, right?
mm-hmm,
And if you can
mm-hmm,
document that process and you can come up with these are the steps, you are infinitely more valuable than just a maker saying, "Hey, I can do your thing for you. Trust me, give me money. Here's your
mm-hmm,
end result."
uh-huh.
Right? This is why we go to web development companies or graphic design companies, because usually they have processes in place that, again, they will deliver something, hopefully, right?
Yeah, I was doing
Not
fingers
not
crossed on
always.
this.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
always,
not
but
always.
but again, like most people don't realize that the process is a piece of intangible intellectual property in
Right,
your business, and
right,
they're so much more important than you actually think about, you
right,
know
right,
because most people aren't thinking about, oh, what's going to be like when I sell this business, right? Sometimes people do, but
right.
you know
No, it's well said, and it's something that I didn't even think of in that particular way, and you know, I mean the message there is it's like it sucks to do, but it's very much worth it because it's what brings value to your company. So,
hmm.
maybe remind yourself like by doing this, you are making yourself more valuable. You are giving more value to your company. I don't know about you. I think everybody's motivations for doing it are different, but it's like I want to believe that I'm all this effort is going into building something that has some value that if I decide that I get tired of it or I want to be able to sell it. I want this to be like a
Hmm.
tangible thing. And
Yep.
we don't think of that when we're getting started a lot of the time because it's like, well, I started doing it because it was fun and all that stuff. But it's like, if I want it to be of value to my next of kin or to somebody that might want to
Yep.
buy it, like, am I building my nest egg here of retirement? Like, I would certainly hope so. I don't want all this to
Hmm.
work to be for nothing.
Yep.
And obviously I got a lot of work to do in decoupling myself a little bit from and that's a whole nother subject, right? When you're talking about the hit by a bus syndrome, where it's like
Oh yes.
right now so much of the value of this company is tied up in like my interaction with it. We look at the
Hmm.
leadership often as carrying the team, but
Hmm.
a business built well or done well, hopefully, should have interchangeable parts.
Yep.
And if you want to get to a point where obviously you're looking at somebody else wanting to buy it, you need to have all those systems in
Hmm.
place so they know that if something happens to you that their value doesn't go to nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And a lot of that is the unsexy process, and the value, and yeah, and tribal
Hmm.
knowledge, as Adam says, and stuff like
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
I'll just it's funny you bring up the the value piece. It's very timely in the news. Obviously, everybody and on social media has been blown up about Elon making an offer to buy Twitter, right, for 42
Uh-huh.
billion with a B dollars, and
Yeah.
there's just everybody going nuts. And we're like, Elon, you could build a really nice Twitter of your own for 42 billion dollars, but that
But
misses a big point
yep.
of it's not necessarily just about, to go back to your trade secret sauce stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about the technology. And like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, you could recreate Twitter for much less than $42 billion. But,
Oh yeah.
is it going to hook people and create and engage people? Like, where is their motivation to want to use that over what, well, we've already got this? Why
Mm-hmm.
do I want to go use your Twitter,
Yep.
Elon? Whatever. Um, I, I won't go too deep into it because I'm skeptical about this stuff, what the motivations really are, and these things really happening. But the point is that it's not just about the dollars and the building of the same thing. It's the je ne sais
Mm-hmm.
quoi, that goes into uh the business. There's a little French for you guys.
Yep.
Uh I don't know. That's a digression. Um, I will say for us, as you like to say we at Gloop, I'll say we at Repkord. Uh, One of our recent organizational struggles was around the fact that we didn't really have a very good shipping and receiving process.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and specifically on the receiving side, I made the mistake, and in going back, I don't know how deep this issue is, but I made the mistake of, when I order something, making the assumptions that I was getting
It's
sent
correct.
exactly what I ordered, right?
Yep.
And so, we can see this on our personal lives all the time now. When you're just buying something off of Amazon, you're pretty aware, like, I paid for this, I got
Yeah.
this, I didn't get this, whatever. But when you're ordering like thousands of something, I'm like, well, that looks like it's 1,000. I don't want to sit down and count them and stuff like that. But the truth is, you're
Yep.
dealing with vendors a lot of the time that are, probably less efficient and organized than you might think that they are. And
Mm-hmm.
there will come times where they will, put a packing slip in and say, like, this was this, and it really wasn't. Sometimes to the tune of being off by hundreds of things, and you want to talk about costly mistakes, letting stuff like that slip through. You're basically paying for
Mm-hmm.
things that you never got.
Yep.
And I can see a lot of people be like, well, how hard is it to sit and count? Well, when you're going a million miles an hour and you're trying to get stuff out the door, a lot of times you're just like, it's not worth it. And sometimes it's not
When
worth it to
you're
count.
yeah.
But
When you're ordering 10,000 bottle caps for your bottles
right,
and you're short by 500,
right,
right?
right.
Granted, it might be like, oh, well, 500 out of 10,000, but 500 bottle caps at, 80 cents a bottle cap, that adds up.
Beep, boop, bop, boop, boop, boop. Math. Yeah. Somebody, 80 cents a piece, five is
Yeah.
400 bucks,
Yeah, something like that,
4,000.
you know?
Math, guys, math. It's hard. Um, but yeah, it does. And so obviously, there's other tricks to it. You're not having to count
Mhm.
onesie twosie. Like we use,
Yeah.
weight obviously for
We use weight.
measuring
Mhm.
things or double checking things. It's all about
Yeah.
coming up with. But the point was, like, only recently did we even start talking about what the process was for receiving, just to make sure, like, and the challenge is when you have multiple people that, like, for example, I'm not at the shop right now, but we're open and we're probably, things are coming in. And so somebody else is receiving. And before it was just like, oh, cool, we got a box of this, great. They didn't place the order. They don't even know how many are supposed to be there a lot of the time. If we only got one
Mhm.
of 5 boxes, or if this was the whole order, they're just like, okay, great, brackets. I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna put it on the shelf with the other brackets. And I might come back later. I'm like, hey, did the brackets ever arrive? And then somebody's like, oh, I think Mike got them. And so
Yep.
that stuff really matters when you're starting to move units.
Yep.
And the better you do to set those processes ahead of time, the better off that you'll be. So I hate that we
Mhm.
learn, the real trial by fire stuff, but
It is a trial by fire.
it's painful sometimes. And that goes back to the whole when you assume, thing, the saying,
Mhm.
you really do make an ass out of yourself sometimes. I had to go back to a vendor months and months later, after like we did a reconciliation of everything. I'm like, man, we're missing like 250. I don't think these ever arrived, and we're finding out that maybe one of the freight companies that said they delivered something never actually did, because I said, well, show me the manifest, and there was somebody else's signature on it, and it said it was received by someone else, like that we didn't know. It was like I walked around, hey, did you sign for this? No, no, no. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? But the
Oh,
fact, how embarrassing is that? We didn't catch that for like 3 months down the road.
yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but hopefully something comes of it. And it's just, these are the things that I tear my hair out over. I'm like, man,
Mhm.
and that was thousands of dollars worth of material.
Yep.
Well, once again, we've covered a lot of ground. We've gotten emotional. We've shared some things. We've laughed. We've cried. We've done other stuff. I think um, I think there's a lot here, guys. I think that hopefully we've shared some anecdotes with you guys to help illustrate that there is value in creating these systems. We've talked a little bit about specifics. Unfortunately, it is one of those things that is going to be very tailored to your business a lot of the time. So,
Mhm.
if you've got more questions, comments, feel free to tweet at us and all that stuff. We're happy to guide where we can.
Yep.
I would encourage all of you guys to try to carve out some time in your day, if you're gonna do a takeaway here, to, like I said, take a step back, look at things, look at where you're weak, identify where some process doesn't exist that'll really potentially move the needle, and like Andrew said at the top of the show, try to identify that low hanging fruit first, right?
Mhm.
Like, you've got so many things drawing your attention, take some strategy here and like really realize 80/20 rule applies, which means like 80% of the yeah, I'm gonna botch this. I always botch the 80/20 rule. Like 80% of the problem can be solved with 20% of the. I don't know. You tell
Yeah.
people the 80/20 rule, please. I'm gonna put it on you.
Oh, come on.
Okay. I think most of you guys know what it is. We won't dive in,
Yeah, yeah.
but go for that low hanging fruit. That if you want to get the most impact for what you're doing, like identify those things and start there, so that you're not overwhelming yourself with all the things. Again, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mhm.
You eat the elephant one bite at a time. Make sure you just keep taking those bites, man. Just keep taking those bites.
Mhm.
Um, and you'll get there. You'll get there. Okay.
Yep.
All right. It's been your inspiration with Pooch for the day.
Where's Chris?
I know. I know. Yeah,
We need his words of wisdom.
we're just, yeah. Chris Perillo and his inspirational plaques that he reads to everybody on a,
Yeah.
on a regular basis are great. I love that stuff. I do. I
Yeah.
actually like find some volume. Grant's gonna save me. He threw me a life raft here. He says, go for the 80% that takes 20% of the time, not the 20% that takes 80% of the time. That's a good
Yep.
way to put it, Grant. Thank you for that. Um, you know, it really does help when you like slow down, stop. Your job as the leader, I've said this
Mhm.
before, is building fire stations, not putting out the fires. So put the systems in place that allow you to, move toward being the owner and not the operator. And your job very much in that role is identifying, the sweet low hanging fruit.
Mhm.
And now we're beating a dead horse. So I
Yep.
am going to call it here. I want to thank everybody for joining us and wish you, as always, a happy Friday. Again, hope we catch you again soon. At any point, if you guys want to join the conversation, we welcome that. I know we're intimidating, and that it's not always convenient for everybody to call in and stuff, but we do love that. We do love it when it's not just us listening to the sounds of our own voice as much as we do like that.
And
Um,
we love different opinions
I
because we
want
don't.
counterpoints, man. Yeah, let's
Yes.
have a discussion.
Mhm.
So, use that link, come back on a future episode, suggest new topics and stuff for us. Hopefully this has been valuable for you guys. And until next time, this has been Pooch and Andrew signing off. Have a
See ya.
great weekend, everybody. Keep on making that money.